Hello, everyone. Welcome to this very special episode of Truth or Demons. I am so excited to share this episode with you all. I reached out to Andrea Perron, the oldest daughter of the Perron family, aka the Conjuring film family, when I started researching for this podcast, and I'm delighted to share she agreed to speak with me. I just want to take a moment to say how very grateful I am to Andrea and what an absolutely amazing experience this was for me. So without further ado, for all you lovely listeners' listening pleasure, my interview with Andrea Perron. Also, please forgive my excited interrupting and nervous laughter. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't just a little bit nervous. Okay, enjoy. After a brief ad break. Hello, everyone. Are you ready to embark on a magical journey into the world of nature's treasures? Look no further than Into the Woods Stones and Crystals. Discover the enchanting collection of stones and crystals that will ignite your spirit and elevate your well-being. At Into the Woods Stones and Crystals, they offer a treasure trove of Mother Earth's finest gems, all carefully handpicked to bring you positive energy and healing vibrations. Whether you're a seasoned crystal enthusiast or just beginning your crystal journey, they've got something for everyone. From amethyst to quartz, citrine to obsidian, each crystal is a unique masterpiece waiting to enhance your life. And if you listened to my interview on Creepy Chisma, you know how much I love obsidian. But that's not all. When you shop with them, you're not just buying crystals, you're investing in a deeper connection with nature. Their crystals are ethically sourced and sustainably harvested, ensuring they protect the earth as they share its precious gifts. And here's a special treat for you listeners. Use code TRUTHORDEMONS, all one word, at checkout to enjoy an exclusive discount on your purchase. Ready to bring a touch of magic into your life? Visit their website, into-the-woods-stones.myshopify.com. I'll put the link in the show notes. Explore their exquisite collection and don't forget to follow them on social media for updates, special offers, and crystal wisdom. I will put all links in the show notes. Into the Woods Stones and Crystals, where the magic of nature meets the power of your spirit. Shop now, enter Truth or Demons at checkout, and let the journey begin.
Hi, Stevie.
Hi, Andrea. How are you?
Good. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I am very excited for this.
Good. I'm so glad. I don't want you to be nervous. There's nothing to be nervous about.
I always get nervous on phone calls. I don't know why. I can text all day, and I love to write, but like when I have to use my own words right out of my brain, I get nervous.
Oh, that's adorable. Oh, God. Yeah, I gave up on nervous a long time ago. I found it a waste of my energy.
I agree completely.
Because everything always works out. So it's, it's the way it's supposed to. So I never worry about anything. So I don't need any questions in advance or anything like that. I think I told you. All you have to do is just press the record button and we can start.
Alrighty, I am ready to record and I am ready with my question. Okay. Before I started, I just wanted to say I really love your books. I think they were beautifully written. I read the first two twice, and I'm halfway through the third one. I'm a slow reader, and I have a problem retaining what I read, but I love reading and being immersed in it while I'm reading.
Oh, that's great, honey. Yeah, the third one, I think, it was the one that I thought would be the easiest to write, finish and publish, and it turned out to be the most difficult. Certainly, it was the most emotionally challenging because it really is an expose of, the back end of leaving the farm is in the third volume when we left the farm and coming to the realization that my mother had been correct all along when she said, we can leave the farm, but the farm will never leave us. And she was right. Yep, she was absolutely right about that. It's, she's right about everything, actually.
From reading your books, I definitely agree.
Yeah, it's, and the third volume is nearest and dearest to my heart because it has that chapter called Collective Memoirs. And it's really a series of essays written by every member of the family, basically addressing the aftermath of having lived there, how it changed each and every one of us in different ways, how it altered the trajectory of our lives,
Yeah, I'm so sorry, my dog.
No, it's okay. I've got two of them here, and they could go off like a shot any moment. And so
yeah,
anybody
she normally
that ever
stays quiet.
yeah, well, she probably knows I have dogs. My little Princess Peanut Buttercup, the Chihuahua that the universe gave me at precisely the right moment in time. My little rescue, she's precious. But she's if the Chewy commercial comes on TV with Ralph and Giorgio about the peanut butter boxes here, that one, forget it. There won't be any stopping her. She will be up on the side of the sofa, barking hysterically at the screen. Even if I say the words around her, to say that she gets all hyped up is the understatement of the new millennium. So, yeah, she's a real big fan of that particular commercial or those two particular dogs.
That's wonderful. I love it.
She's nuts. She's my girl, my baby.
I love it. Mine is Allie, and she's actually my boyfriend's dog. I had a Great Dane for 12 years, and he just passed last year. He was the best dog I've ever had. And then my boyfriend moved in. Yes, they are. They're amazing. And then when my boyfriend moved in, he brought his dog, and she's wonderful. I love her so much.
Oh, I'm so glad. There's nothing like having a dog. In fact, almost every interview that I do, and certainly when I do my shows, I have two shows on KGRA that simulcast on my Andrea Perron YouTube channel. And one is A World Awakening on Friday nights, and the other one is a Soul School Sojourn on Monday nights. And
I've seen one, but I need to catch up on the others.
Oh, they're wonderful. I've just and I'm not saying that to brag. I have phenomenal guests and extraordinary people, and I do something different than everybody else does. In the paranormal community, there's a lot of redundancy. There's a lot of copycatism. There's a lot of, this is mine. I'm not sharing it with anybody, in terms of evidence and stuff like that. And
yes,
I often refer to this field as one in which it happily devours its young. So, I stay above the fray. I just stay above the fray. I
love that. And it's one of the biggest reasons I wanted to interview you, is because I wanted other people, like my listeners specifically, to hear you speak about things that have been really overshadowed by the whole Conjuring series of films and the Warrens as they're portrayed through the films.
Yeah.
So my goal is to show everyone your side and the other sides of the story.
Well, the thing is, I will always believe, because I always believe the best in everyone, and they have to prove to me that they are unworthy of my trust before I will abandon them. And, my mother, I can't help it. I really see the good in everyone, and they've got to, if I see some evil, I'll turn and walk away from the evil. I don't like the dark side. I live in the light, so if there's something like that going on, and, there are some people in the field that are very disingenuous and exploit others, and their stock in trade is fear. And I'm the opposite. Come on, honey. I'm the opposite.
That's wonderful. I love that.
So there are people in this field that don't like me or approve of me because I dispel fear. And that's what they make their living on. So
yes, I can see that. Yeah.
Yep. And they think that it's absurd that we're supposed to be fearful of the unknown. Well, to me, that's a very base human emotion. It's unenlightened and uninformed in the extreme, and it serves no useful purpose. The only way for us to spiritually evolve is to come in contact with the other side and begin to engage in spiritual dialogue. How extraordinarily wonderful is it that spirit can make its presence known to us in this realm? I think
Absolutely.
that is the greatest gift that humanity has ever received. And the whole notion of ghosts and spirits can be found in literature as far back as literature goes, when humanity began to chronicle its own life experience. So as far as I am concerned, I don't consider it paranormal. I think anything that exists is normal. Anything that exists is natural rather than supernatural. But I do think that there are multiple dimensions that exist simultaneously. We live in a 3-dimensional, 5-sensory realm predominantly, but we also live in a multi-dimensional universe simultaneously. So that's why some of us who are open to it and who are exposed to it can actually see spirit, feel spirit, engage with spirit in a way that maybe some others can't or won't or don't, because they simply are too afraid to go there. They don't want to even admit that it exists. And so these are the ones who are fascinated, and yet also the ones that seek their answers around like horror movies and things like that. So anybody that has watched The Conjuring, for instance, was left with impressions, and they were deep impressions because it was in a very well-made film. However, it barely even scratched the surface of the truth of our story, and you know that now, having read the trilogy, that's just one long, extended story that wouldn't fit in one book.
Right,
had to be broken up into 3. However, it does detail in a way and inform in a way that no film ever really could. And it's not that they didn't try, but they really, they went in some wrong directions. For instance, it was Mrs. Warren who walked into the farmhouse and said, "I sense a malignant presence in this house. Her name is Bathsheba." Now, let's give the woman credit where credit is due. She had never heard that name in any kind of an association with the farm. She and her husband walked in blind. We had no idea who they were when they showed up at the door. A younger, less experienced paranormal investigator who had of his own volition come to the house. He said, "My mother called and invited him." And she's like, "I didn't call anybody." So we don't even know how that happened. We'll never know how that all came to pass. But apparently it was meant to happen. And he's the one that informed the Warrens about what was happening at the farmhouse. And that happened in 1973. So we'd already lived there for a couple of years and had been through, a great many experiences by that point. So when Mr. and Mrs. Warren showed up at our kitchen door the night before Halloween in 1973, it was because they had been told what our predicament was by this younger paranormal investigator who at the time was only around 19 years old. And he and his team had come to the farm first, and nobody knew who they were or why they were there. My mom thought that they might have been friends of mine from school, older, upperclassmen or whatever. I mean, they were driving, but I was 15 years old at the time when they came. And then about 6-7 weeks later is when the Warrens came. So the movie leaves you with the impression that my mother sought them out. Nothing could have been farther from the truth. She had no idea who they were. but they seemed relatively harmless. It was 1973. People weren't afraid to open their doors to strangers. And so she invited them in, and Mrs. Warren immediately went to the black stove in the kitchen, and she covered her eyes and put her hand on the corner of the stove and just said what I can repeat to you, which is, there I sense a malignant spirit in the house. Her name is Bathsheba. Well, here's the thing. This is what happened. My mother, because Mrs. Warren came up with that name out of thin air, figured that she must actually be legitimately psychic, because the town historian had already told us about Bathsheba Sherman's connection to the farm and that she was a neighbor and so on and so forth, the whole story. And, we didn't know if it was true or if it was not true. But he was a very, very old man, and he knew Bathsheba before she died. She died when he was 10 years old.
Wow.
So she died in 1885. He was born in 1875. And we met him in 1973, 72, I think, is when we met him. And he's the one that told my mother about Bathsheba Sherman. But then for Mrs. Warren to walk into the house and pick up on that name. However, before she did any further investigating, she made kind of a leap in terms of an assumption that anything negative that was happening in the house was attached to that spirit. That was caused by that spirit, which is why in her case files that she sold that made the film The Conjuring, that's why Bathsheba was the villain in the film. But Bathsheba was not even born before the spirit that was haunting and taunting my mother had lived and died. And that's just based on what she said to my mother, and the language usage was already out of usage when Bathsheba was born. It was kind of a broken brogue, a little bit of Middle English. She approached my mother one night and hung over her and said, "'Twas mistress once afore ye came, and mistress here will be anon. We'll drive ye out with fiery broom. We'll drive ye mad with death and gloom," and did this whole long incantation, which I'm sure you have read.
Yes.
That is, will send chills up your spine.
Yes.
And it was done in this almost like a Scottish brogue. I don't know for a fact, but the family that built the farmhouse originally were the Richardsons, and they were from England. And they still live, the family still lives in Burrellville, in the town where the farm is. So
how did you find out about them?
It was in the county and the town records. My mother scoured the records to do as much historical research on the farm as she could. She had all of it in a 3-ring binder notebook, including all of her descriptions of the spirits and the incidents that had occurred, her impressions of them, an annotation of her fear and how she responded, and even sketches, drawings of what they looked like. And when she showed the book to Mrs. Warren, Lorraine said, could I take this and make Xerox copies of, all of these birth and death certificates and, all the information that you have and your experiences in the house. And this thing was about 2 inches thick. It had so much material in it by the time the Warrens came. And my mother trusted her and handed over that precious notebook to her, and she never saw it again.
Oh, my goodness. That's awful.
Yeah. Yes, it is. And, some things that my mother had found at the house disappeared the night of the seance, things that she had shown them that she had dug up from under the stairs in the cellar, and things like that, things that were protruding or she found
Wow.
in the barn and stuff. And there was a whole bag of them in the china cabinet the night that they came and conducted a seance that went so terribly wrong that it almost cost my mother her life.
Yes, that's what I've read. I haven't read all of your third book yet, so I haven't. If I have anything to question that was covered, forgive me. But I wanted to go ahead and ask you a series of questions that would lead up to you explaining that night and what happened.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so let's see. Let me find where I started with those questions. I have a whole list of questions I'm very excited about.
Okay.
Okay, so when Lorraine got there, she said she recognized the presence already and gave you a name instantly. Do you believe that? Okay, so did she say it was a demon, or did she just say malicious or a bad spirit?
Yeah, she said that she did not use the word demon, although subsequently on other visits, it became very clear that the Warrens were devout Roman Catholics, and everything seemed to resolve down to being either good or evil, angels or demons, good spirits, bad spirits. They just had a whole different take on, the paranormal than my family did. Our experiences were with multiple spirits in the house, and not all of them. In fact, most of them were perfectly fine, benign, or even benevolent. So there was, her proclivity to make spirit activity demonic, I think, is not helpful to the field, because it is very rare. I don't even know if demons exist. I've never seen a demon. I don't want to see a demon. I live in the light. I shun the darkness. I don't let anything dark near me. And in fact, it doesn't dare come near me. So
that's awesome. Yeah. And I agree completely. And I'm glad for you.
I just, I know that evil exists in the world. I saw it the night of the seance. I saw something evil happen to my mother that was intentional, deliberate. And whatever it was that attacked her had all the power that it ever could have needed to kill her. It didn't want to kill her because it could have. It just wanted to make its presence known in that house, and it did. I believe in evil, but I don't necessarily believe in demons, and I don't have the same kind of Roman Catholic theology wrapped around my belief system after having lived in that house for 10 years.
That makes sense. So do you think then that with them coming and being there, they may have inadvertently invited a dark entity or something to make the house, what was happening, worse?
Yes, and I don't think that they did it deliberately. But I think that Lorraine's presence in that house definitely stirred up. It had been relatively dormant prior to their arrival, and it didn't stay that way once they had been there. And I don't know if it was because, we were all talking about it at once and sharing our experiences with Mr. and Mrs. Warren, all except for my sister April. She wouldn't talk to them. Because she had a little friend upstairs. Yes. She had a little friend upstairs in the closet, and she loved him, and he was a very scared little spirit boy, and she didn't want to tell them about him because she was afraid that they could make him go away, and she didn't want him to go away.
Was this her secret friend that she didn't talk about often?
Right.
Or ever? Okay.
Yeah, not until years later. Yeah.
I understand why she did that then. I would have been the same.
Yeah. She was, in her mind, she was protecting him.
Oh, I love that. That's so sweet.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a specific question about a line in your book. It says, the information disseminated and subsequent knowledge gained resulted in an unimaginable consequence for their family, as it was eventually used against them in the most hideous conceivable way. And this was in reference to the Warrens. Can you tell me a little more about that?
They promised not to talk about our case. They promised my mother that they would not, she didn't, sign a non-disclosure agreement with them or anything like that. My father didn't want to have anything to do with them at all. He thought that they were just, going to exploit our family in some way. And he really kept his distance from them and was only there a couple of times that they came. However, my mother felt more felt like maybe they were somehow authority figures in the field. She was, young and naive and had never encountered anything like this before. And these were people that seemed to know what they were talking about. And so she invested her trust into them immediately and disclosed everything to them that had happened to that point while we'd been living there. And they said that they would not write about it. They would not talk about it. They would not disclose it at all. And then they turned around and started doing seminars and spoke at length about the experiences that they had at the farm and what they had encountered, what they had sensed there. And instead of just saying, some innocuous colonial home in New England, they named the town, they named the family, they named, and we were inundated with curiosity seekers. We had one guy that drove all the way from northern California, all the way across the country to come and park himself out in front of our house and demand to speak to our family, including the children. That did not sit well with my parents.
I'm sure. I bet that was a really stressful time.
Well, yeah, and it left us very vulnerable because when we bought that farm from Mr. Kenyon, he handed my parents a whole ring of old keys that didn't fit any of the doors. There was no way for us to lock ourselves for security. There were no keys to the doors. And so the doors remained unlocked all the time. And we would have had to redo all the doors to put the kind of locks on, deadbolts and stuff that we could lock it from the inside. And it would have destroyed the doors to do it. And they were 250-year-old doors. So, what do you do?
Yeah, that's incredible.
So, needless to say, when people started showing up in our yards and they heard about us from the Warrens and so on and so forth, my mother's head exploded on her shoulders. And she was more than anything extremely disappointed that something like this would have happened after she thought that it had been made very clear that this was to remain a private matter.
Yeah. I can only imagine. My goodness.
Mm-hmm.
How long did that go
on? Off and on for the whole rest of the time that we lived at the farm.
Wow.
Yeah, it subsided over the last few years, but I don't know. I don't even remember. It was kind of a, not a constant, but a chronic problem of people pulling into the yard and saying, we heard about your house. We heard your house is haunted. We've come for the tour. What tour? Bye-bye. We weren't selling tickets. We were just a family trying to live a private life, and that kind of got ruined for us. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm sure it didn't make your last years at the farm any better.
No, although the last years at the farm, I was in college for, 8 months out of every year. So it was not as bad for me. I was in an entirely different state and environment. But it was, it was hard for my mother because she, of course, being so protective of her children, you don't want strangers hovering around your home when you've got 5 girls,
Yeah.
And these strange men, we had one that was outside, that he was protesting or something. I don't know. He had some kind of picket sign. I wrote about it in the book. I think it's in volume 2 somewhere about, his warning people to stay away from us, that we were evil. We were whatever. My mother, my mother pulled the shotgun down off the front.
Don't blame her.
Yeah, and she shot about maybe 10, 12 feet over his head, but he didn't know she was shooting over his head. My mother's a crack shot. And he left. He left.
That's good.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to the Warrens. In your book, you also mentioned how Ed and Lorraine showed up with hopes of catching activity because it was so close to All Hallows Eve when the veil was supposed to be finished. And
yeah, my mother laughed. She's like, well, then every day is Halloween because it doesn't matter what time of day or night or month or year. Anything can happen in this house at any time. You know, we've lived here long enough to expect the unexpected. And she basically said, I don't believe there's such a thing as a veil. Certainly not here.
I thought that was interesting how they chose that day and time. And it made me wonder if, since I didn't know until you had told me that the 19-year-old boy had brought them. So my question was, do you think that they heard a rumor and that's why they came at that time? So I guess if he told them, then they probably thought that would be the best time.
He told them in September, but they waited until October to come to the house.
That answers my question then.
Yeah, right before Halloween, because they thought that would be the best time for them to stand a chance of encountering something in the house.
Okay. And when Lorraine got there and after she established her realizing the entity of Bathsheba, did she insist that your family needed spiritual intervention?
Not right away. Not right away. More, I think their curiosity was piqued more than anything, and they wanted to initiate an investigation.
Okay, and how did they go about doing that? How long in total did they come to stay with you or visit you if they didn't stay with you?
No, they never stayed with us. That's another thing. You know, the movie makes it look like they moved in and solved all the problems and it all ended, happily ever after. And honest to God, it was the opposite. My father didn't want them there. My mother, kind of snuck them in a couple of times so that Ed could talk to us and she could talk to Lorraine when my father was away. And because, he owned his own business, his own jewelry business that he ran out of the trunk of his car. He was not a truck driver. That was just an easy way out in a Hollywood script. But, just, to get him away from the house. But it was not like that at all. But there were some, as I said before, the movie leaves people with, very specific impressions. Most of the film is fictional, most of it. However, it leaves in the grand sweeping strokes, the impressions that it leaves with a viewer, I think is threefold. And that is that good conquers evil, love conquers fear, and the Perron family experienced an extreme haunting that they all survived. And all of that is true. All of that is true. And so they told the story their own way. And in fact, the screenwriters told me personally when I was on set, which was in Wilmington, North Carolina, that they had tried to integrate some elements of our story into the screenplay. Everybody associated with the film had read my books. Everybody was blown away by the story, and they wanted to tell as much of the true story as they could, but they were limited in two respects because the film was based on the case files of the Warrens. And so how they wrote up their experience was entirely different than what actually happened. And they only came 5 times, one time, a 6th time, just to make sure my mother was still alive because they didn't know when they left the house the night of the seance if she had survived. And so, so there was that. But also, it was a matter of the real story being what they deemed too intense you know, all human beings are to some extent or another fear-based carbon units. We all are. We all have fear. Fear is integrated into hardwired into our psyche, and it functions as a service to us if we listen to it. But we very often tend to relinquish our power to it instead of using it to forewarn us about one situation or another that might not be in our best interest. So that said, it was a matter of the suits at Warner Brothers Studios and New Line Cinema who sent the script back 7 times to the screenwriters and told them to take out any element of the truth from the book that they had put in, because they said it was too intense. It would run people out of the theater. It was overwhelming. They wouldn't get the PG-13 rating that they wanted because it was too scary, and they didn't get it anyway. Even with I was with James Wan the day that the MPAA came down with their ruling on the rating of the film, and they gave it an R rating, and oh my God, he's a little guy, and he seemed to double in size at that moment, got all puffed up, very indignant, and told his assistant to get right back to them, and he wanted an answer as to why it did not get a PG-13. And about 15 minutes later, his assistant came back to him and handed him a little scrap of paper, and it said 4 words on it: "It's just too scary."
Wow.
So he sent his assistant back with another message, wanting to know what he would need to take out of the film to get the rating that he wanted, which of course would fill a multitude more seats. And this was back before COVID, so theaters were doing well, but an R rating was like a death blow to most films, because they're looking to fill it with teenagers, and they can't come without a parent, or a guardian. So they said that there was nothing that he could remove that would that would change their minds.
Oh,
there
wow.
was nothing. Yeah. So it went out into the world with an R rating. It still blew the box office wide open. It is now to date the most popular, best viewed, and has made more money than any other horror film in existence, including it just recently bypassed The Exorcist, that had like a 30-year head start on it. And now it's the most popular horror film currently in existence. And I think and I think it's because it does tap into a truth in a visceral way, and people really cared about the characters. I think they filmed it beautifully, and they cast it perfectly.
I agree completely. It's one of my favorite films as a film.
Yeah. It could not have a better cast. But, when people watch it and they see Ron Livingston, who was playing my father, all lovey-dovey with Ed Warren, no, not the way it went. Not even a little bit. Yeah.
Yes, I've read different things, people commenting on that scenario, and I would love for you to tell me what really did happen with your father and Ed, and what led to them being thrown out.
Well, it was the night that they showed up at the house for, it was a Friday night in August of 1974. Come on, Peanut, come on in, my little dog. She follows me everywhere like a puppy dog, because she is a puppy dog.
I love it.
I know, she's my baby. So anyway, they showed up. They had called ahead, but, cell phones hadn't been invented yet. They called from Monroe, Connecticut, which is at least a couple of hours drive from Harrisville, Rhode Island, and asked my mother if they could stop by that night.
And this is almost a year later from their first visit.
Yes. And
Okay.
they had come several times in the interim. But my mother was very reluctant because my father was on his way home from upstate New York. He had been gone for a week. He would be very tired, and Mom had to make dinner and take care of all of those things. And she was very reluctant to let them come, especially when she knew Dad would be home. And they were insistent that it was very, very important that they come. Well, unbeknownst to my mother, they were coming with an entire entourage of people, including a medium, a priest, cinematographers, an audio specialist, and someone else as an assistant, I believe. It was a house full of people. Well, at the dinner table, my mother told my father that the Warrens were going to come by, and he got really upset, and he's like, no, call them and tell them not to come. I'm going to watch a baseball game and read the paper and relax and see my girls. So no, I don't want them here. And she's like, it's too late. They're on their way. Well, oh my God, you could have scraped the ooze of negativity off the pores from my father's skin. It just, oh my God, he was like just livid, and he didn't want them here. And so when they showed up and they had all these people with them, he blamed my mother because, if she knew they were coming, then as far as he was concerned, obviously she didn't bother to tell him that they were bringing a small army with them. And it was ugly. It was not nice how it went down. And, Ed came in the house and tried to talk to my father, introduced him to the priest that they brought with them. And my father was not interested. When they started talking about we need to do a seance, my father's like, nope, not going to happen here.
I don't blame him.
It's just not. And things got really bad. And at one point, my mother started just shutting down emotionally because she was overwhelmed by the negative energy that was coming off of him. She was afraid things were going to escalate into a worse situation, which they obviously did. And the priest and Ed took my father off to another part of the house, and they were with him for probably half hour, 45 minutes anyway, talking him into this, telling him that this needed to happen, that my mother was oppressed and she was on the verge of being possessed, and they had to intervene on her behalf immediately, or we were all going to lose her, and so on and so forth. So my father thought that this was the worst idea he had ever heard, ever in all of time in memoriam, and that no good could come of it, and he was absolutely right. However, the situation degraded quickly. All five of us were home. My mother told us to get on the phone and start calling around to see if there was somebody that we could stay with for the night. Nancy was the only one that found somebody to stay with. She took off and went over to Katie's house, which is only about a mile away. So she just walked over the power lines to get there. And the rest of us were in the house. And so when they started doing the seance, my father did not want to participate. He did not want to hold another man's hands. He did not want to play paranormal in any way. And was just, very obstinate. And his attitude was, if you have to do this, hurry up and go do what you need to do and then get out, And Lorraine said something to him that she never should have said. She was sitting next to my mother, who was obviously struggling and who was like catatonic. She wasn't even really responsive. And Lorraine just looked at him and she said, if you love your wife, you'll let us do this. And oh my God. I mean, Ed just grabbed him by the arm and said, Roger, just come with me. He took him out into the summer kitchen, which was by that time my parents' bedroom. and the priest went in with them. And they came out about 45 minutes later, and my father very begrudgingly allowed the seance to go forward, which he regrets to this day.
Yeah.
It was very fast. It was over in a matter of a couple of minutes. The medium, Mary Pastorella, sat at the table and started conjuring. That's where the name of the film came from, because I wrote about her conjuring the spirits. And, basically threw open wide the doors to the netherworld, was speaking probably in Latin, I'm not sure. She, for all intents and purposes, she invited everything in so that they could determine who the culprit was in the house.
Wow. That's Ed's
really,
way.
yeah, really, really bad idea. You don't go into a supremely haunted house and just kick those doors wide open and invite the spirits in to make their presence known en masse. And something that I swear to you was not present in that house before that night came through and attacked my mother. And she just, it was horrific, Stevie. It was a horrific thing to witness.
I'm sure.
She was lifted in the chair that she was in. The table was lifted and then slammed back down. All the candles that were lit, all snuffed out at the same time. My sister Cindy and I were standing looking through a slit in the door of the hallway into the dining room where all of this was happening, and my mother's chair levitated with her in it, and in a split second, it flew from the middle of our dining room into the middle of our parlor. My mother's head hit the floor, and everybody in that house thought they had just seen her die.
Wow.
It was awful. And when my father went to run to her side to assist her, Ed grabbed his arm to stop him. And my father turned around and punched him in the face and bloodied his nose and took him to the floor, took him to his knees.
I can't blame him one bit.
It was just awful. It was awful. Awful. There are no words.
That sounds so intense.
Yeah. And my father threw everybody out of the house. It took about 45 minutes to an hour for my mother to regain consciousness. The thing that I think I most resent, if I resent anything, was the fact that, in the film, they made it look like there was a police officer there in case anything went wrong, that people knew about this and were, there to assist. And that just wasn't the case. I mean, Ed saw me in the hallway on his way to the bathroom, holding his nose, holding his face with blood dripping through his hands. And he looked at me and he said, "Don't call the police."
Oh, wow.
So, and my mother's laying unconscious on the floor, and I'm a kid. I didn't know what the hell to do. I did not know what to do. We had been told to go away and disappear in the house and not to witness anything that happened. And we saw everything, and he did not want that reported to the authorities, period. And I didn't know what to do because we weren't supposed to be there.
Yeah.
So I didn't want my father, who was out of his mind in a rage, to know that we had witnessed that.
Absolutely.
And I didn't know if I should call the police. There was no 911 back then. If you were in trouble, you called the police and then they decided who to dispatch.
Wow.
So I was, it was awful. It was awful.
Did you tell your dad that Ed said that to you later?
Yes, I did.
What was his response to that?
Oh, can you even imagine?
I'm sure he was so distraught.
Yes, he was, incredibly so. The conjuring ends with everybody sitting in a circle and all hugging and loving on each other, and, Mama's come back from the other side, and First of all, Ed was the only layman on the planet at that time, literally the only layman on the planet that was trained to assist in an exorcism. There was no exorcism. My mother was not possessed. My mother was attacked by invitation, which was spiritual malpractice as far as I am concerned.
I couldn't agree more.
And, so it was, Ed would never have attempted to conduct an exorcism on his own. That was ludicrous. He never would have done that. He had way, way, way too much respect for the exorcists in the Roman Catholic Church at the Vatican under which he had trained.
Correct. And he was a demonologist.
Never have attempted. No, it was absolutely anybody that knows the background of exorcism, where it comes from, where it emanates from, how ancient the ritual is, all of that. It is, there are a handful of priests in the world that conduct exorcisms, a handful in the world. Yes. So this was not something that he would have done. He would have considered it, no matter what the circumstances, a sign of ultimate disrespect. So, most people leave with the impression that Ed was an exorcist and that he pulled my mother back from being, possessed by Bathsheba. Oh, I'm going to be explaining this for the rest of my life. I can tell you right now.
Because of the movie, yes.
The movie's not going away. Every time people watch it, especially younger people that have grown up enough that they can now see it, without, needing somebody there to hold their hand. It is, the questions never end about it. But I will say that I'm so grateful for The Conjuring. I would not be one of the best-selling authors in this genre had it not been for The Conjuring. My books would be languishing in obscurity, just like a bajillion other books, because they didn't have a feature film made. And the power of that medium is so extraordinary that because of The Conjuring putting out a fictional version of events, the truth of what really happened to our family is getting out in the world in a way that it never would have. So
and the interest was sparked.
Yes. So I'm grateful that The Conjuring was as well done, made with as much integrity and authenticity as possible. I know that the people that put that film together really wanted to integrate elements of our true story into it, and they were stopped from doing so. So I don't blame.
Constrained.
They were, and I don't blame anybody for any of it, because had I not lived what I lived through with my family over the course of 10 years in that farmhouse, I don't know if I would be able to handle this story. I don't know if I would even believe this story. I can't tell you one way or the other if I would, because in some ways it is, as you well know, quite literally unbelievable, some of the things that happened in that house.
Yes. And the way you tell the story in the novels, in your books, is so, the detail is so good. You feel like you're there and you're experiencing it. One of my favorite scenes is the scene where I'm pretty sure it's Cindy and she's fighting outside against the wind to contain the horses. And an invisible being helps her hold that wood up so she could get it nailed in to contain the horses.
Yes, and
I felt like I was there.
And she said to this day she swears that was Mr. Kenyon that came to help her.
That's wonderful. I love that.
Yeah, she will always. I know it was him. I know it was him. Yep.
Yeah, that's great. I love that.
Yeah,
I don't blame her.
He loved us. Mr. Kenyon absolutely loved us, and we loved him right back.
I love the way you wrote him. It was so easy to feel that about him.
He was an extraordinary man, truly extraordinary
That's awesome.
man. Yep. So, okay, honey, can you hold on just for a second? Can
Absolutely.
you just hold
Go
on
ahead.
just 1 second?
Okay.
Sorry, cat and dog patrol here.
No worries.
Okay. Okay. So you have any more questions?
I have just a couple more. You've covered most of them, it's been so awesome. So my next question was, after this happened with the Warrens and they were kicked out, when did you see them again? Did you see or speak to them again before the filming? Did they contact you before they wanted to start doing the film?
No.
So you didn't hear from them until then?
We didn't see them. Well, they came to check about, okay, hold on a second. Okay. we have an outdoor kitty who is, she's chasing the squirrels around the side of the house. Not good.
Aww.
Okay, so ask me that again. I'm so sorry.
No, you're totally fine. When did they contact you again after they had that big night?
All right, so here's the timeline. The seance occurred in August, it was hot as hell, of 1974. The next time we saw them, they came to the door, I guess once they had determined that my father's car was not there, and that it was safe to come to the house. And because of the circumstances under which they left the house the night of the seance, they did not know what my mother's status was. And so they came back about, I would say probably about 6 or 7 weeks later, to check and make sure that she was okay. And that was, my mother had asked repeatedly for her notebook to be returned, and it hadn't been, and there was always an excuse why they didn't have it. And that night when they came to the kitchen door, my mother opened the door. They both expressed delight at seeing her look so well. My mother asked them if they returned her notebook. They said no. And she said, "We're all done here." And she quietly closed the door and walked away. And they left. Yeah. And then I didn't see Mrs. Warren again for 40 years. And it was 3 months before the opening of the film. And we had been invited out to Hollywood for a private screening of the film prior to its premiere. And that's when I saw her, and that's when, during the course of that weekend, she told me how sorry she was about how things had gone, and that she said that verbatim, we were in over our heads as soon as we crossed the threshold of your farmhouse. We just didn't know it.
Wow.
So I thought that was an important admission.
I agree. Were you contacted by Warner Brothers before the Warrens and spoke with them about the film?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I had to sign contracts and everything with them.
I figured, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I knew that the film was going to be made. I knew that it was going to be based on the case files of the Warrens, that it was going to be one of a series of films, the number of which would be based on the success of the first film. So that's why they now have the Conjuring universe, because the Conjuring was so popular that it spawned 6 more films. But none of those stories have anything to do with our story. There's just 6 different case files. Yeah.
Yes. And your movie is what drove me to start researching, which in turn drove me to want to create the podcast. So that film did a lot for a lot of people. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it did. I think it opened up a lot of eyes. I really do. I think that it made people at least consider the possibility that what we experienced was real.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
In reference to some of the things that happened to you guys while living there, I have a friend who also runs a podcast, and we've discussed a few things, and she has a listener that has a ghost question, and they can't seem to find a good answer. And I read something similar happening to you and your sisters in your book, and her question was, why do blankets get pulled off us when we're trying to sleep, when we're sleeping, or when we're on the verge of sleep?
Sorry, I stepped outside for a moment, and
you're totally okay.
Oh my God, people! I swear to God, they should all be arrested. It's so loud. Disturbing the peace. That's what they're doing. They're disturbing the peace with their mufflers.
Sounds like my neighborhood.
Oh God, it's terrible. So anyway, I would say that based on the amount of energy that they could have access to make their presence known in the house, sometimes we would see full body apparitions. Sometimes we would see smoky, hazy, swirly mist. Sometimes we would see a partial figure and then it would kind of phase back out. And sometimes we would see nothing at all, but inanimate objects would move. And I think that the pulling of the blankets is just part of, a spirit that maybe hasn't a lot of energy reserves to show itself in any other way. It's one way to let the human being know that they've been there, they are there, they're in the room, here I am. And, I'm what pulled the blankets off your body.
Yeah. Do you think
it's an attention-getting device.
Yes. And do you think when it happens and then our fear of it in turn feeds them to be able to do it more?
I don't know. I think the jury's still out on that. I do know that an expulsion of negative energy in the house would always result in activity. And I don't know if that activity was because we were feeding the beast, usually my father, throwing a temper tantrum because he doesn't believe in ghosts, or, this can't be real, you're making this up in your head, I leave you alone too long, all that crap that we went through for the first year or so.
Yeah.
Until it was all started happening to him, and then, didn't he change his tune pretty quick? However, I think that it's either that energy, that expulsion of human emotion in the form of negative energy could certainly have fueled it. But my impression is that when like a bottle would go flying across the room while my mother and father were arguing, and it would, hit a window, and it should have fractured the window and shattered the glass bottle, and nothing's disturbed, nothing's injured. You just pick up the bottle and go put it back where it belongs. Your boombox. Right. Yeah, exactly. And it just seems to me that at least in those cases, those particular episodes and scenarios, I think it was a way to make the fighting stop. I think that the spirits didn't like it. They didn't want it. The animosity between my parents about this subject, and the way to show my father that they exist was also the same way that they could silence him. And that was to make something happen in the house that was absolutely inexplicable, that the only rational explanation for it, the only plausible, realistic explanation for it was that ghosts exist.
Yes.
But that's just my opinion.
Oh, it's a very good one. I agree with it completely. What do you think made it go dormant for a time before it would return?
I don't know. We have no idea. It would, they would usually be pretty quiet around the holidays. Like they would just let us enjoy the holidays together as a family, and not really. I think only once or twice at Christmas did we have a spirit that was present, and she seemed to be relishing watching us around the Christmas tree, relishing our celebration of the holiday.
And a lot of love energy.
Yes, it was a lot of love energy. And she was the one that was really the kindest, the one that we don't know who she was, but she was very sweet. And when she would show up, she was the same one that would come through the bedrooms at night as everybody was, falling into a deep sleep, and you would feel a sense of warmth and something near your forehead, like kissing your forehead, but you never actually felt anything. And we knew that it wasn't our mother because our mother bathed every day in ivory soap. So my mother smelled like ivory soap all the time. And the spirit that would check on us at night before we went to sleep smelled like an odd concoction, like homemade perfume, a very sweet scent of the mixture of flowers and fruit. And that was not Mom.
Wow, that's really neat that you could smell those distinct smells.
Mm-hmm.
And I know
she
that
was warm.
smell is
She didn't have that cold death sensation that some of them did.
Yeah. And the smell is supposedly associated with the stronger spirits that you encounter the most.
Yes.
That's really incredible. Okay, I have asked all my questions. I do have a small handful of questions from friends and listeners, if you would be up for that, and then I can let you go. Awesome. Okay, so you're amazing. Thank you so much. Okay, so first question is from my friend Lori. She runs the podcast Creepy Cheeseman, and she wanted to ask if you had an opinion on Hat Man or shadow people, what your thoughts on them were, and why so many people see them. Is it just anxiety or possibly something else?
I don't know. And I will be the first one to use those three words without shame or remorse. There are no experts in the paranormal. There is no such thing. We are all little children lost in the dark trying to find our way home to the light. All of us are.
I agree.
All the time.
And I completely admire someone who can say, I don't know. I appreciate that.
Don't know. I mean, I think that shadow people, I don't know. I think that there's an interesting intermingling that is occurring between what is considered fourth and fifth dimension. The fourth dimension is considered by a lot of folks that work in quantum physics and quantum mechanics and, the sciences around this. They have developed at least a theorem, a hypothesis, that multiple dimensions exist simultaneously. Well, I've been given that information from an alternative source, and what I consider the highest source of information. And I've been a contactee since I was a child. So I think
have heard you speak about this.
Yeah, so I think that living in that house is what, pried wide open my third eye to the fourth dimension, and then I was able to see into the fifth and beyond. I can't read a menu in a restaurant, but I can look out into the stratosphere and see, what's going on out there and who's hanging around and see different vessels. And, there's all kinds of activity going on around this planet, whether the government wants to admit it or not. I consider them the lying liars who lie. This is the worst kept secret in all of human history. So,
I couldn't agree more.
I really do believe that we, the contactees, the people who experience these things, are the point of disclosure. And when enough of us say, wait a minute, I saw something that can only be explained one way. And, these are people who are credible, and these are people who are professionals, and these are people that have a lot to lose. by putting themselves out there and choose to do it anyway, because what they're witnessing is more important to them for all of humanity than their own reputation. And so I think when you get to that point where you really don't care what other people think and you're willing to speak your truth regardless of the repercussions, then that's when the truth comes to light. And I believe that it has come to light. And I believe that there were things that we witnessed in that house that we might have considered to be spiritual in nature. I hate to use the word ghosts because it has some, negative connotations to it, in the same way that I don't use the word abduction when it comes to the galactic family, because I just think that, the negative implications of that word are such that they prey on people's fears. And there's nothing to fear here. There's nothing to fear here.
I love that message, and I really liked the way you used that in the novel. Instead of saying ghosts, you said things like extraterrestrial spirits, and I really loved that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if they're no longer earthbound and they're not attached to, human vessels, bodies, then that qualifies them as extraterrestrial. They're still of the world, but not in the world.
That makes so much sense. Okay, I have the next question. It's from a Paranormal State of Mind podcast, and they wanted to know if you have ever seen or experienced anything in other houses you've lived in.
The house that I live in now in Florida has a spirit in it, which is not surprising to me. And his name is George, and he's a cranky son of a bitch. And he's not particularly fond of me. Because I say what I think, and I'm just a different kind of woman than he was used to, and certainly, he loves my father. He thinks my father's the bee's knees. He's got issues. He doesn't like the way I've arranged the antiques in the house. He doesn't like the fact that I have not planted a garden in the backyard, because he did, because he had time to do it, and I do not. He has issues. I have friends who are, bona fide psychic mediums who routinely visit me, and they'll walk in and they'll be like, "Oh, George is, he's still here." And yeah, I know he didn't die in the house. He died at the hospital in the 70s when we were living at the farm, but he built that house. And to him, it's still his house, and we're the intruders, and he likes Dad fine. He's doing better with me. And, I told him, I said, before I'm done with you, dude, you're going to be a feminist, and that's just how it's going to be. And you better get used to the idea, because I'm not putting up with this. And every now and then he acts up a little bit and he starts moving. He does the one thing that he knows is going to irritate me. And that is, I'm a Libra. I cannot help it. All of my pictures have to be straight on the walls all the time. And so every now and then I'll get up in the morning and every single piece of artwork in my house is crooked.
Oh my goodness.
And that wasn't that way when I went to bed. So either we had an earthquake that nobody felt, or he's on one of his little rampages. But yeah, it's fine. I just ran with him. But you know what? Going back to your question about shadow figures, I think that shadow figures have more to do with spirit than anything, because when I see him in the house, that is how he appears. He had severe osteoporosis. I know this from one of the neighbors that lived there, decades ago, and said that he was kind of a cranky, crotchety old guy, and his wife would never speak unless she was spoken to, and they had a weird dynamic in their relationship, and he was obviously the boss, and I don't put up with that crap. So he's got issues with me. But when I see him, usually I'm sitting in my office at my English roll-top desk, and there's a hallway outside my office door, and to the left is the door to my bedroom, and I have the whole front of the house is my space. The what I call the West Wing is my space. So it's a couple of closets, a bathroom, an office, and my bedroom. And when I see him, he's usually walking through the door of my bedroom, through the hallway, and he's all stooped over, and I can see like the shadow of a hat on him. But his head is bent down, and he was a very short, small-framed man. And he just kind of floats down the hallway like, here I am, there I go, you know. And it's like, okay, so I just saw that. But so, yeah, you know, just based on my own experience, I think that shadow figures are a form of spirit, and that's as much as they can manifest based on the amount of energy that they've been able to tap into to make their physical presence visible to us. So the only times I've ever seen him is as a shadow, but a solid shadow.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's really interesting. I love that answer. All right, I have one last question from my listeners and friends. This is actually from my friend Dan in Australia, and Callie, my friend Callie in England would also like to know. We've pretty much already discussed it, but they wanted to ask you directly how much of your story was exaggerated by the Warrens.
I wouldn't even use the word exaggerated. I mean, in many ways, what came of their case files in The Conjuring was toned down. And you, as a reader of the trilogy, must now know that what's in those books bears no actual resemblance to the film. And yet there are elements in that film that I refer to as the cosmic kisses, the things that are in it that lead me to believe that this is exactly what the universe intended, including the scene where the camera rounds through the corner coming into my bedroom. Shanley Caswell plays me in the movie, the eldest daughter. And I almost fell out of my theater chair when I was watching this film for the first time. And I saw a picture, a folk art picture of a white cat sitting on a paisley pillow. I have that exact picture hanging in my office in my home, and was given to me by my mother's friend for my birthday when I was 13, when we were living at the farm. And I've had it ever since. And there was no way the woman who was doing the set decorations for the film knew anything about that white folk art drawing. And it could have been paint by number for all I know. It is identical to the one that I have. And the one that I have looks like it's on one of those paint by number boards. And it was meticulously done. It was beautiful. And so is the one in the film. And she pulled that out of a back lot at Warner Brothers in a building the size of a football field that housed only items from the 70s. And she was drawn to that picture and put it up on the mantel board in my bedroom in the film, and had no idea that that was one of my personal possessions. No idea.
That's incredible.
You know, and there were a number. I mean, you know, I talk about synchronicities. Yes. You know, and I don't believe in coincidence. I think that there were cosmic forces that were at work and at play making this film, and that it is exactly what it's supposed to be, and it's exactly what it needs to be to entice people who are really legitimately interested in paranormal activity to seek out my family's memoir, my family's story, so that they can really know the truth. And so these two elements now work hand in glove to bring this story to the light, to bring the truth to light. And the truth is so much stranger than fiction that they wouldn't even touch it.
Agreed. I love your story. It is phenomenal in comparison to the movie. Even though the movie as a movie is incredible, your story in comparison is by far just so much better.
Well, thank you, darling. I worked my heart out on it. I spent 7 years writing those 3 books.
It really shows. They're incredibly written. I'm a huge fan of writing, and I've always wanted to be a writer, so reading your books just fuels me more.
Well, they've got a few little glitches in them, and I'll fix those things when I republish with my new publisher, and I'm going to republish one at a time. And there are things that we have discovered about the house recently, about spirits in that house recently, that I'm going to need to either do a follow-up edition or I'm going to need to make changes to the book. I don't think I'll make a lot of changes to the book because it is so authentic. It's not a history book. It's based on our family's recollections. And so, I don't, but I do want to get the history as correct as I possibly can. And of course, there are many things that we're never going to know about the different people that lived in that house over the course of almost 300 years. There are things, Facebook did not exist. We're never going to know what they had for breakfast or what their plans were for dinner, or, how many baskets of tomatoes they got out of the garden. We're never going to know these things. However, recently, 2 very good friends of mine have found a way to communicate directly with spirit. And that's Cody Despiens and Satori Hawes, Jason Hawes' daughter. And he was the first paranormal investigator after our original foray into that with the Warrens, decades later, was invited in by what was the current owner at the time to come to an episode of Ghost Hunters there. And so anybody that's interested in seeing that can find it online. It is season 2, episode 7. It's the second half of the hour-long episode, and it's called The Sutcliffe Investigation. And she invited them to come in the house, and they got so much stuff, so much evidence in just the 2 nights that they were there that they couldn't fit all of it into the episode. But I now work with Jason's daughter, Satori, and her boyfriend, Cody, and they have a way of connecting directly with spirit, not just at the farmhouse, but in a number of different locations that they've investigated at. And one of the things that happened recently, I was not there to see, but it has been filmed. I've seen the film footage of it. And oh my God, it just knocked me out of my shoes. And they embrace each other or just hold hands or, touch each other. And this innocuous knocking begins. And it's spirit, and they spell out the words that they want to say. And so it's a very tedious process, and Satori has to go through the alphabet over and over again, and somebody has to, notate what is being said when the spirit stops knocking and says, yes, that's the letter, so anyway, it's a very time-consuming and tedious process, but oh my God, what it yields is phenomenal. And they were doing a session at the farm, and a spirit came through that they didn't recognize and had not read about in my book. And he identified himself as Joseph. And everybody kind of looked at each other like, do you ever remember Andrea mentioning a Joseph? And is he in the books anywhere? And all of a sudden, the tapping started again, and he spelled out this sentence. Are you ready?
Oh, my goodness.
Nancy called me Manny.
Oh, my goodness. The first apparition in the house.
We thought it was Johnny Arnold. We did all those years. We thought that it was Johnny Arnold that drank horse liniment and died as something ruptured in his stomach. He didn't die of suicide. He was drinking horse liniment because it was a cheap source of alcohol, and It just destroyed his stomach and he bled out. You know,
oh my goodness.
Yeah, and we always thought once my mother discovered that story about the farm and what had happened, she figured that the spirit that we had been seeing of the man in the house must have been Johnny Arnold. No, he has self-identified.
That's incredible.
Joseph. Oh, but
That's amazing.
The best was when I was there with them last year, and they were doing a session, and all of a sudden, Satori looked at me and she's like, oh my God, they're all trying to talk at once. They're all trying to talk at once. Oh my God. And she's like, okay, everybody back off. Okay. You have a message for who? They spelled out my name. Well, they got to the A-N-D, and then, of course, we all knew who it was, and we said, Andrea. She said, Andrea, and, you know, knock 1 for yes, 2 for no. It was a knock yes. Okay, what's the message? How many words? She said to them. They knocked 4 times. 4 words. Okay. They started spelling out what they wanted to say to me.
Oh.
We miss your family.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That's so incredible. I bet that was so wonderful to hear.
And I think that belongs in the books. Or it belongs in an addendum. Or, you know, I mean, these things that are happening are compiling, you know. I mean, the whole thing with Joseph and the whole thing with Abigail Arnold, and she comes through all the time. She's, you know, been talking about she had 2 pear trees on the property, and she wants the now new owner to plant 2 pear trees on the property. So and they have to be X amount of space apart because that's how she had them, so that they can cross-pollinate. And you know, and Jacqueline Nunez, who owns the property now, she's like, I promise you, I will plant pear trees on your property. So touching.
That is wonderful. Because I really think the fans would love to have some updates and hear those things. I think that would be a great addition.
Yep. I do too, which means my work is never done. My work is never done. Oh, Lord God. But, you know, it's the saga continues. It's the never-ending story. You know, it's been more than 50 years since we moved into that house. I was just a little kid. It completely altered the trajectory of my entire life, growing up in that remarkable, phenomenal, mystical, magical place.
Oh, I'm sure. That's wonderful. I am so glad I got to talk to you about this. Thank you so much for agreeing to an interview.
You're very welcome, sweetheart. It's been lovely spending time with you, too. And I hope that our story opens many minds and touches many hearts.
I'm sure it will, and I hope that, too.
Well, I will leave you today with the advice that I give to everyone I meet and the way that I close my show every Monday night. And that is with one sacred piece of advice in a very dark world. Be the light you seek.
I love that. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, sweetheart. Thank you so much for including me on your podcast. And
Absolutely.
I send my very best wishes to all of your viewers and your listeners.
I love that too. Yes, thank you so very much.
You're welcome, sweetheart. Have a lovely evening.
You too. Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye, honey.
Bye.